Well, folks, today on Rethink Real Estate, we've got Rachael Ashley back, and we're going to be going through the process of her putting on an assistant. I believe that it's a really great learning experience that Rachael has gone through, but there was one real insight to why she did this, and I think it's the insight that most people miss. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Well, folks, I've got Rach here, and every time I start it, she laughs. But either way is that we've obviously just done the other episode about expired listings and then circle prospecting and accountability groups and also role play groups. So if you missed that episode, go back to the other one and jump in. But I wanted to take advantage of having Rach here because we're using up her valuable time as we've got a couple of auctions on auction day as we're approaching, so she's busy. But the reality is that I really wanted to talk to you, Rachael, about putting on an assistant, because it's something that you did at the beginning of this year, or give us an understanding of the timing of when you did it and how long it's been.
Yeah. So, and sorry for laughing in the beginning. I think I know you too well. So that when I do Zoom calls, I'm like, uh-oh. But yeah, I wanted to bring on an assistant last year. So it was Q4 of last year. I had started working when did I start working with my coach? I guess it was May of last year. Because I was really happy with my first quarter of last year. So I was like, all right, I got to keep the momentum going. So I added in a coach. And the thing that we talked about was not that I didn't have the capacity to do everything that my assistant does now, but she was like, I'm wondering what business you're leaving on the table because you're doing things that take up time that you shouldn't be doing, like putting lock boxes out, making key copies, that sort of thing. So she had really encouraged me to plan on doing that in 2025. And then when January rolled around, that was like a top priority. So I basically just posted stuff on Indeed and, very clear job description of what I was looking for. A requirement for me was that the person was licensed because I wanted them to be able to do open houses and show property for me. But I think the biggest challenge with it was also making sure I didn't find someone who was licensed trying to become an agent, because then you're just setting yourself up to do all this training and then have this person, want to do what I'm doing. So yeah, I listed it on Indeed and it took a little while. There was a lot of people that reached out and at first it was really overwhelming. And then my coach gave me really good feedback with screening people. And she was like, don't even look at their resumes. She was like, don't even bother looking at that. Just tell them to call your phone number or put a fake phone number and leave a voicemail answering a series of questions, like why they want this role, how they can contribute. Are they licensed? Do they have any real estate background, or what's their customer service background, that sort of thing. And then just listen to the voicemails. And she said, you'll know within seconds if it's someone that you want with you on your team, reflecting you and your business. So there was a lot of people where I was like, I can't set up a call with this person because they're going to be calling home inspectors or clients or whatever and scheduling things, and they have to sound professional. And the first person that I hired, she seemed great. And we were all lined up for her to start working with me. She had the first day set, like great communication. And then she just didn't show up on the first day. And the day before she was supposed to come in, she didn't confirm the meeting or confirm coming in. I sent her a text being like, hey, so-and-so just reaching out to, like, looking forward to meeting you tomorrow at the office. And she just never showed up, never followed up. And the only thing I told myself, and my coach was like, okay, I dodged a bullet. Better for it to happen before she started than 3 weeks in. But that really bummed me out at the time. And I had created all of this stuff that I was like, I'm going to hand this off to her because I knew I also was going to be paying this person.
You were mentally prepared to do it.
I was mentally prepared. So then that happened. And I think because of that, it also got me in the mindset of, okay, wow, now I have all these things that I really should hand off to someone. So then I just went back to the drawing board and started over and connected with my assistant, great voicemail. And she's in the office today. And then we set up a Zoom meeting, and then we had a second one. And my only concern was that she lives kind of far away from the office. So I was just nervous that for last minute things, I wouldn't be able to call on her as often, or that she'd get burnt out from the drive down here. But the reason why she really stood out to me was her level of follow-up and enthusiasm was so strong that I was like, okay, that's what I needed to see. And I've told her that since. I was like, the reason why you started working with me was because you were really fighting for this position and you were excited about it. Whereas other people, I felt like, were kind of above certain tasks, which I was blown away by, because it's like we all do them at different points. So
Yeah. It's funny the level of entitlement that you ultimately then experience being an employer, but that's a really great understanding of what happened and where you went to. I think some of the gold out of that, Rachel, is that from your coach's perspective of letting you know that, hey, get them to call a phone number and then answer some questions on a voicemail. How did you set that up? Was it just a separate number? Was it your own number? Like, how was
I used my own phone number, which was a little tedious at the time because there
Yep.
was a lot of voicemails, and then obviously you're like, which ones of these do I need to listen to? But
Yep.
but no, I mean, I think it worked out, and and then I also had her. I said, okay, I want you to send me an email introducing yourself. I just wanted to see, like, even just the basics of how do you can you do that basic thing? Because if someone can't, again, it was just such little things, but it's an entry level position. Like, I'm not paying someone enough money where they are going to be this incredibly, I don't know, I guess you kind of get where I'm going with it. Like, I had to
I do. It's so funny. Like, I remember the first hire that I made in the US is that, like, I did it based on charisma and the connection that we had at the time, and they couldn't even write an email.
Yeah,
They'd never even done an email. Like, I'm like, oh dear,
right?
yeah, it was unbelievable. It was just like, anyway. But you're 100% right. But Rachel, I want to talk about the transition though, because that's a really great understanding of how you got to the point of that person being the right person in order to then put them on, and then the disappointment of somebody coming on and then handing it off. I want to get to that transition point though, because it sounds like there was a little bit more preparation that went into it before you advertised on Indeed. You had systems, processes, and things that you needed to sort of hand off.
Mm-hmm.
How did you go through that process? Because just so that you know, the biggest challenge that I've ever seen with people putting people on is that they expect the person to create their own role versus give them the role. Yeah. And that is one of the biggest challenges that I typically see, is that most of the time people aren't as astute as what you are, as putting somebody on and going through that process of figuring out they're the right person. They usually put them on, they usually leave, and they don't create the position whilst they're there for a short period of time. So they never replace that person, because at the end of the day, they'd never had something from an infrastructure perspective in the beginning. So how did you come up with the stuff you were going to hand off and what you were going to do?
Yeah, so I started out by not rushing right into it, but I started keeping a list. Anytime I did something at the office that I felt like wasn't like an income producing activity, that I was like, okay, this is taking up time, I would write it down. So then it became very clear that I had this ongoing list of things like inputting a listing into the MLS, creating a property description, scheduling a photographer, scheduling a home inspector, putting a for sale sign out, ordering a sign to be installed, ordering signs in general, lock boxes, like all the things. And I just kept this list going. And then pretty quickly I realized I had this big, list of items. And then when it came to systems, I mean, if I wanted to show someone how to input a listing on the MLS, I had a step-by-step thing of how to do it. It was basically like, try, figure it out, and follow this. And if I need to tweak it, I can. But there's definitely been, learning curve. I've had to teach a lot because my assistant didn't have any real estate background, but she's picked up on things really quickly. Yep. And it's been so helpful.
So talk to me about the patience that you need to have, because I think that there's a level of frantic in most people's real estate mentality that ultimately, when you're just on the go and you've got lots of things happening and somebody comes in and asks you a question that's going to take you some time to show them, but you've got so many things that you're juggling already, I'm assuming that their attitude is not great with that response, and their level of detail when they're explaining it to somebody isn't great either. You're a busy person. How did you give that time? How did you have that patience? Was there anything that you needed to do on a daily basis to remind yourself of that?
I mean, it's funny because I'll ask Disha, that's my assistant, for feedback, and I'll say, hey, is there anything I can do to help teach you? Because I haven't had someone underneath me, so it's important that I'm also trying to make sure we work well together. And she did tell me, she was like, just maybe show me things more than once. And so what we started doing is, if I show her something and like inputting a listing in the MLS or scheduling open houses on the MLS, whatever it is, if it doesn't click for her, she can then send me a calendar invite for 15 minutes or 30 minutes, where then it's in my calendar to go sit with her at the table in the office and walk her through those things again. Because I can't expect her to learn something one time, even though that would be ideal, right? So that's a big part. And I think when it comes to like the patience part of it, when she first started, it was in a lull for me with business. So I had a lot of time to show her things. And my biggest worry when she first started was financially committing to giving her a set amount of hours every week and then not having enough stuff to fill her time. And so in the beginning, there was a period where there wasn't a lot for her to do. So I was kind of coming up with systems and prepping her for things to come, which was a helpful use of time. And then I was having her do a lot of extra stuff for my A group. I was sending out a lot of market updates to them. I just had her doing a ton of busy work that I got a lot of positive feedback from those clients.
I was going to say that is that there's a challenge when you employ somebody, and having been through this, myself when we first started, any of our businesses back in Australia and here, is that you have this situation of that you worry about this time where they're not doing anything, but naturally the right people will find the right things to do.
Yeah.
And I think Disha is somebody that strikes me when you first meet her, and certainly being able to, obviously, have been with you now for quite some time, is that she's the type of person that would try and figure out some initiative to what needs to happen next, or what should we be doing right now in order to improve things, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, she's been great. And one of the things I had her do when we first started, when it was slow, is I had her take the full auction accreditation course. And then I had her listening to some of the videos that I've done with Mike Ferry, so she could really get an idea of the conversation, because I knew I wanted to set her up to be able to hold open houses for me.
Right.
And so that's something she now does. So even lately, like, I have a financial kind of budget that I have of wanting to keep it at, she's part-time at 25 hours a week, with the intent that within a year or so she'll go full-time, because hopefully I'm growing my business so much that I need her every single day. But even the last couple of weeks, having her at so many open houses, and then I would be at some, it was like she was filling up her hours so quickly on the weekends, and then the weekdays would roll around. And there was a couple of weeks where she was easily doing 40 hours a week, and it was constant stuff I needed her to do. So but yeah, it's really helpful to have her do open houses and showings.
So let's talk about the transition to open houses, because just so that everybody knows that isn't from our company, is that, the reality is that when you do an open house, you've got to collect people's names and numbers. Now, again, don't get me wrong, is that she's probably doesn't have any expectation not of being in real estate previously, but you told her from the very beginning, no, you stand at the door, you've got a check-in sheet, you take their phone, you take their name, their phone number, if you can get an email address, great. And you actually, put her in a position where she is taking down people's names and numbers, every single person that's walking through the door. Yeah. And I think that that's one thing I want to use as a real point to anybody that's listening. Like, if you've just got a sign-in sheet on the kitchen bench top or the countertop or whatever, it doesn't work, right? You got to be at the front door. But it just goes to show that Disha is there, not really any real expectation. She's doing it. But how did you go, one, training her on all of that stuff, and two, obviously she probably shadowed you, but two is that letting go of that, Rach, because that's a really big source of your inbound business as well.
Well, I think the big part that, and even my coach has been really trying to push me on, is that it's really helpful to have her there, because I'm paying her to be there versus giving it to another agent who will expect a split from it. So that's a huge part. So the business will come back to me because I'm doing all the follow-up. But we would sit down at the office and practice. Well, the first few open houses she came with, a lot of open houses with her. And a lot of times I would step back and I would talk to people and answer questions about auction while she would just sign people in. And then I was able to give her feedback on different ways of asking questions, or just getting people's information and making sure it sounds natural, almost like they have no other option but to give it to you. But I think one of the hard parts for her was teaching her that if someone says no about their phone number, then it's just politely saying, okay, I'm sorry, I can't let you through the house. And then just smiling and just waiting, because usually they'll give you their information or they'll walk away and they probably weren't the buyer for the listing. That's and right. I know that's been hard for her, but sometimes it'll be good when she's shadowing me, because I can show her how I do that with people. And it's like, it's not that big of a deal. We're honoring what the client wants. It's a requirement. And for me, it's really important, because then I have all of that information to A, get the feedback for the sellers, but B, and probably the biggest driver there, is to see who needs to sell a house out of that list. Yeah. So I've also had her, especially now that the market's not as busy as it once was, when we didn't have time to breathe between people coming through, when there are those breaks and people coming, she'll search their number just on True People and check their primary address. And so when she's plugging this information into Housemate, she'll add their primary address, so that when I'm doing my follow-up calls on a Monday, it saves me that step. And I can already reference, do you need to sell your house on Golden Lantern in order to buy this property on Bolivia? That sort of conversation.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Great. That's unbelievable follow-up to have that type of information as well. It's one of those things that is just perfecting the business by little inches and little bits like that. That's just a gigantic step in order to actually get more business. Having heard, look, those people people up and find out where that primary address might ultimately be. But I guess that the question, hindsight's a beautiful thing. What would you do differently going through this process? Obviously, we wouldn't have the false start with the first person, but everything happens for a reason. Disha wouldn't be here if ultimately that person didn't show up. Did you ever hear from that? I'm just curious. Did you ever hear from that person?
Never did. No,
I hope they're okay.
Whoa. It blew me away. Even just a courtesy text to be like, hey, got a better opportunity. Like, I wouldn't have been offended, but
yeah. But I guess that what would you do differently, Rach, in going through this again? What would you change, if anything?
The thing I would have done differently from which I did the second time was making sure people left the voicemails first.
Right.
That is what I would have done differently. And even a step before even having a Zoom interview with them. And it's just like a great, because I don't know if like interviews and fair housing laws or whatever, all the things that you have to be careful of. Like, I would ask them to send a video, like take a video and introduce themselves, because if someone isn't dressed professionally, I had someone on a Zoom meeting wearing a t-shirt and I was just like, this is a Zoom interview. So I think having them send a video as well, where like you can see they're dressed professionally, you see how they communicate, but most importantly, just how they're showing up. Like, are they sitting on their couch or did they take the time to have like a professional background? That was really important for me. But just doing it again, it would have been making sure they leave a voicemail versus wasting any time reading someone's resume.
Now, as you've sort of gone through and taught Disha everything, is there anything in the learning stages of things that you would do differently? How you've communicated, how you've like the programs that she's done. Is there anything that you would try and get her to focus on first more than others? Is there anything you do differently in the training process?
Probably giving feedback quicker. She's really receptive to feedback, and that's made it extremely helpful and easy. Like, it's just nothing. It's just professional. There's no like hurt feelings. It's like, hey, this is how this needs to be done, or this many open houses signs always need to go out. We can't ever make exceptions. Just always giving feedback as it comes up. And she's so receptive to it that she's made that really, she's very approachable with it. And she actually appreciates it. She's like, I would so much rather have you sit down with me in person, because she's like, my goal here is to help you make money. But if I'm doing something incorrectly, I can't. So she's really receptive to it, but I should have been doing that probably quicker.
Are you financially incentivizing her outside of the hourly wages on anything that you're closing?
No, but if she gets a lead, then yes, because she is licensed. So I've told her, I was like, if you want to go out and door knock and meet people, or if someone in your circle ends up wanting to sell or buy because you are licensed, we have an agreement outside of her hourly that I would compensate her for.
Right. Okay, great. I think that that's a part of this, that most people believe that they've got to give too much away in the very beginning. And I don't think that you need to. Obviously, she is a prime example of that in every way, shape and form. But there's the part of this that, like, sort of rounding out this conversation is that I guess that the element, what is the next hire that you see, Rach? Like, well, let's say that Disha gets to the point that she is like full-time busy, okay, in your mind. Mm-hmm. What's the next person that you're thinking about in your team? Or is it just the two of you that can just do as much business as you possibly can?
I mean, no, I would love to expand it more, because even like, it's so funny how you can have a week where everything is just like even and there's not crazy stuff going on. But once you have a few listings that you're onboarding, especially with auction, because there's so much that goes, it's basically opening an escrow before you hit the market is really
absolutely.
What it is.
Yep.
And I think those weeks I could sense she was getting really overwhelmed, because naturally, like, I'm used to the process, but when you're not, and then there's 4 listings hitting the market at once, it's a lot to balance.
Yep.
And you really can't drop the ball. Like, you can't tell a seller that the home inspector is going to be there at 10 and mix it up with a different property. Yep. So I think in the future, what I'd love to do is have another person in her role so that I can use her solely for the open houses and the things that then she's trained for, because that takes a much, more advanced skill to be able to hold these open houses and have conversations like that and kind of represent the brand that I'm trying to reflect from myself, and then have someone take on what she's currently doing, which is some of the busy work, like scheduling showings for me when I have buyers that I'm working with, and, drafting contracts or summarizing offers. I would love to have another person doing that so that there's more capacity.
I think that there's something that I love the way that your brain works, Rachael, in the sense that it's like, it's not your immediate hire, your next hire is not somebody that is about taking more off your plate. It's more about giving more. What I mean by that is that most of the time an agent is considering an assistant so that they can work less. You're doing it so you can do more. And that's one of the key things that I think that why this has worked out is that 90% of people in real estate are trying to become this machine where the lead comes in, they then see if it's right, and they give it to another person. They're trying to collect a fee off a fee in order to not do it. And I think that this is where this decision comes in perfectly. You're not trying to put a buyer's agent on because you're happy to run the buyer. You're making sure that the infrastructure is there in order to make sure that the open houses are done properly and you can take on more business. You're making sure that Disha is going to be supported with your next hire in order to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. Where most people are going into the position of hiring a position so that they can do less, you're doing it so you can do more. So I think that's a really big difference in the way that you're doing this.
Well, no, thanks for saying that. And I think even having her here when today, she's at the office all day. And for me, it's like, well, if she's here working, like I should be too. Like if I have her scheduling showings, and sometimes that can be so tedious and take such a long time, then I should be on the phones making calls, or I should be going on an appointment. So that's how I see it, is having her here actually motivates me to stay longer and put more time in. And also I'm committed to paying her every 2 weeks. And that has to happen. And I'm glad I've made that commitment. I have no regrets with it. But that also means that I better be bringing in more income, because that's an additional expense that I didn't have last year.
Yeah. The accountability of having a team at the office or having somebody there wondering where you are, or hey, I'm putting in the hard work. And if it's not mirrored, that's definitely, it's one of the things that I have to admit is that there's probably, out of the 7 days a week that you typically work, which it really is, you're always on. There's definitely that portion of it. There's definitely one of those days out of the 7 where I'm like, I don't really need to go in today. And then you're like, no, you're making everyone else go in. You need to go in.
Yeah.
There's that part of it, because I'm not the type of person that can work from home, okay, in any way, shape or form. Yeah. So at the end of the day, going in, I think you're definitely more on by about 50% than being at home, being able to sort of, not do the things that need to be done because you're in that environment. But anyway, I think that there's a part of this that I've really enjoyed to learn as you've gone through it, because most people are not as, particular in the way that they are, Rachel. So I think that your comments and the way that you've done this is certainly something that will help the audience hopefully realize that bringing on somebody is not about doing less. It's actually about you doing more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that's the goal. It's just creating more capacity. So
very good. Well, thank you for sharing with everybody, and thank you for being part of Rethink Real Estate.
All right. Thanks, Ben.
So about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.